Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Supply Chain Talk. I'm Anna Maria Velica, founder at Green Apples Career, and I'm your host today. Our episode is Perfecting Supply Chain Visibility, Vision versus Reality. Amazing topic, which I will debate together with my four experts. We will undertake a masterclass for all of you. I will introduce them briefly, but before we kick off our talk show, I would like to welcome our LinkedIn viewers. Please interact with us, even access the Business Reporter link to get the full episode experience and address questions for my panelists. And why not compliments? Because the best comment and compliment will be rewarded with a Supply Chain Talk mug, which will be couriered by my colleagues at Business Reporter. And the beauty of living at the ground floor, apologies for the background noise. So allow me to invite on our virtual stage my first guest, Ray Hassan. Ray, please, can you switch on your camera and mic?
Hi, Anna.
Hello, Ray. It's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So a few words about Ray. Ray Hassan is third-party risk management manager at Vitality Insurance, where he plays a key role in the development and implementation of strategies to identify, assess, and mitigate sourcing and outsourcing risks. Ray lives near the sea in Bournemouth and likes to make the most of its beautiful 7 miles long golden sandy beach, especially if the sun is up, Ray. My second guest is Luis Taraco, all the way from Mexico. Welcome to our Supply Chain Talk. Please switch on your camera and mic, Luis.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you again on our show. Luis has over 18 years of experience in supply chain management in several industries, CPG, manufacturing, healthcare, and consulting. He's also a big car enthusiast, constantly following from the automotive industry to automotive sports. Exciting. My third panelist is, I will try to do my best to pronounce correctly your name, Ronan Minatel de Godoy, Head of Supply Chain Management at Bridge North Aluminum Limited. Can you please switch on and camera on, Ronan?
Hello, everyone.
Welcome to
Hello, Anna. Thank you.
It's good to have you here, Ronan. A few words about Ronan, a leadership enthusiast and supply chain executive with vast experience in fast-moving established industries and startups. He's led teams, high-performing teams, achieving best performance through leadership fundamentals with always a good sense of humor, transparency, and empowerment. And as a fun fact, he's very much into fitness. He loves a good run, high-intensity training in the gym, and he's a former Brazilian jiu-jitsu competitor. Amazing, amazing.
Thank you.
Last but not least, also someone very familiar to our audience, Ville Parkinen, Director of Product Marketing at OpenText. Hello again, Ville.
Hi, Anna. Glad to be here.
Good to have you on our show again. Ville is Director of Product Marketing at OpenText, where he oversees solutions involving supply chain digitization and data integration. To balance out his work, Ville also acts as an ice hockey referee during his spare time, currently officiating his 20th season with sport. Amazing. So as you know, and as you can see already, we have not only very experts at the table in supply chain and procurement, but also very fit. I have a very fit panel of guests today. So, as you know, in order to avoid any accidents and any surprises in the gym, we do a warm-up. So let's warm up with the news item. And I will invite our viewers to open the chat box, because our amazing producer will publish in real time the link to the news item, which is global supply chains are getting stronger, but weaknesses persist. And I would like just to highlight one of the key message of this article is about inviting supply chain leaders on onboarding a massive transformation, which actually means about aggregating all the tools under one ecosystem, one digital ecosystem, to create end-to-end supply chain visibility, to avoid risks, to avoid cost. And I would like to, as a round table, I would like to invite for your views. So what do you think about the news item, Ray?
Thank you, Anna. I found it to be quite enlightening, but nothing revolutionary, if I may say so, because some of these issues and risks that we have faced over the last 10, 15 years, and specifically over the pandemic period, has been amplified, and that comes quite clearly on the news article. So I exist in a financial industry, and our risks do materialize through the technical advancement, through the risk management channels within the sourcing and outsourcing and the supply chain. So the more and more technologically we advance through the years and capabilities, it attracts more and more what we class as bad actors to have more an opportunity to create cyber attacks, ransomware, malware. So some of these things have become a dual blessing and a curse in a sense. So yes, we are getting more sophisticated, but with that sophistication comes a little bit more of a deeper need to understand your supply chain.
Thank you, Ray. Luis, what's your views?
Oh, I agree with Ray. I think that the even though the supply chain is more stable, there are some impacts as it's in economy in general, with political tensions, with wars. So that part regarding technology, it's a good win, but at the end, I think that business have to establish where their most critical impacts, or what's their priorities, so they can invest on that part. Because at the end, as Ray was saying, there's an investing in going deeper, getting more information, getting more data, and also the economical budgeting for these tools or programs. And you have to understand where are you going to be using those resources, so you can take the time and resources to use these tools.
Not a very easy job to do supply chain management nowadays. What's your view, Ronan?
No, I would probably just concur with them all. I think in my eyes, especially what I see in my current employer, I think what's happening with the geopolitical situation and the Red Sea issues, it's pretty much impacted us a lot. So last year, we could see a very high, very strong headwinds in the beginning of the year, because the Red Sea, they increased the lead time significantly. We see lots of delays in the supply chain. I think that's that everything that's in the news there in the article is pretty much what we're living nowadays. And I think any other business will face the same difficulty going forward, if it's not already facing it. And let's say the increase in freight forwarding, the increase in the costs are just part of the supply chain nowadays. I don't believe that's going to go away. I think the only thing we can do is just prepare for the future and try to acquire as much data as we can, so we can risk mitigate everything that's going to happen going forward. Obviously, with a bit of hope that things will go back to the previous standards, but yeah, that's something we can't actually say.
Great, great views, Ronan. Thank you, Ville. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I guess unsurprisingly, I agree with the other panelists here, but I'm not sure I agree with the headline of the news article, because I think instead of saying weaknesses persist, I think we should say challenges are evolving, because that's sort of the main point of the article. Like with all the regulatory developments and the political tensions, I mean, there are not new things, but there are new developments, and they're consistently evolving. And I guess from my point of view, obviously very close to the technology around the supply chains, the digitizing supply chain information exchange, the addition of new technologies, it improves or kind of helps us to add more governance into processes. But then at the same time, it does create new complexities and challenges that we then need to tackle. Like if you have more technologies to manage, then that's a challenge in and of itself. So I think that's one perspective maybe that I thought of when I was reading through the article.
Thank you, Vila. Yeah, very good builds. And I would like us to go into the main topic now, the state of supply chain risk management in organizations. What are the trends and priorities when it comes to creating that vision of an end-to-end supply chain that helps supply chain leaders to predict in real time all these challenges versus the reality nowadays? So could you please share your views, Ray?
All right, just coming off mute. It's a great point, great question, one we constantly think about and have to work across other estates on our organizations with to collaborate on. From my perspective, from a financial industry, we are, as I alluded earlier on, more and more under increasing sophisticated cyber crimes, attacks, and regulations around deployment of AI tools, regulations around third-party risk management. So there are ever-increasing regulatory requirements, and we have to deal with that and change the way we have previously worked on those topics. So the priorities are set by organizational strategies, as well as the external activities that the government or the cross-border governments put in front of us. But largely speaking, because the world's moving towards a buy rather than build model of technological solutions. So rather than building solutions in-house, we are buying off-the-shelf software as services, tenancy within big cloud systems. We are experiencing more and more a need for cybersecurity, security between endpoints. So that's where most of the cyber risk and third-party risks lie for our services, which are not quite as tangible as maybe manufacturing.
Thank you, Ray. And Luis, what are you seeing as trends and priorities in your line of work?
I think that it'd be important just to establish like what are your priorities as a business. But regarding risk, I agree with Ray that you usually partner with those who know. Like you're talking about cybersecurity, which is a big deal with digitization in most industries. So Schneider has this manufacturing electrical and electronic components history, but also going to digitalization and becoming more a tech company. So I think that part is important, in terms of operations, working with operational risk management, the financial part, understanding also how can you establish this risk assessment, in a deeper way with your most critical supply base, going through tier 1, tier 2, and mapping of the supply chain, the logistical part. Where are your more critical points, so you can work on that. The ideal or the visibility could be like something perfect that doesn't exist, but at the end you like to have as much covered in terms of, what's your critical operations, and you can be covered on that part, and having the ability to pivot quickly in case you have, some disruption.
Thank you, Luis. Yeah, lots of priorities and risks given the current reality we are living in. I just want, before I go and ask you, Ronan, to share your views with us, I just want to remind our audience again, please join us for the full episode experience via Business Reporter website. If you attend live on LinkedIn, please just interact with us, ask questions, and make comments, because the best comment, the best reaction will be rewarded with a Supply Chain Talk mug. So, Ronan, I know from when I mentor organizations and leaders, the ESG and the sustainability risk, which involves reputational risks, comes on top of the list. What are you seeing in terms of risk management trends priorities from your experience?
Oh, that's a very good question. I was going to tap into exactly this. So when you look to different businesses, obviously you have different supply chain. One thing interesting when you're working with commodities is that at these moment, especially commodities related to metal, you will always be talking about CO2. CO2 is something is not really the money. Is very high emissions in any sort of metal industry, because obviously you have to cast the metal, and then you generally use gas to do so. So it's very high CO2 levels. So in the end of the day, because the current regulations and the way the EU is moving, there are some regulations that are going to become effective on 2027. That's called CBAM. So at this moment, you see all metal suppliers shifting their focus from a very cost-intensive negotiation to a more related to CO2 emissions, and you see premiums actually changing when you go for negotiations. So there's always like, we are using hydropower, so it's less emissions, so it's increased premium because of a greener metal, so to speak. So you see this trend happening anyway. So you see some of the automotive suppliers also asking the same question. So are you actually working with a low carbon metal, so we can provide to them, and they want to put this sales pitch in their product at the end of the day? And we see the same thing for packaging consumers, such as, let's say, if you buy a yogurt, the lid of the yogurt is made of somehow of the aluminium, right? So you will see this pitch in all the various markets we have footprint on. Interesting question, because ESG has always been there. If you look 10, 20 years ago, has always been there, but at these moments it's becoming more critical, because it's actually touching the pockets of the consumer, because it will cost to them in the near future. It will cost them a bit more if you go for a high emissions product.
Thank you, Ronan. And I would add a list of trends, priorities, like total supply chain vertical integration, nearshoring to avoid and reduce carbon footprint. So there are lots of trends when it comes to ESG. Ville, what's your view in terms of trends, priorities when it comes to supply chain risk management?
Yeah, again, very broad topic areas we've discussed. So we've mainly focused on the ESG and kind of the regulatory risks. I think one interesting thought that occurred to me, at least, was that in some cases, the regulatory risk, or what might be viewed as a risk of non-compliance with regulations, is actually protecting the company against some of the other risks that the regulation is supposed to sort of address. So I think in some cases, like forced labor, these kinds of things, like it actually forces you to actually look into the risks in your supply chain and mitigate them. But of course, it does add burden to companies. It's such a broad topic area. We could go into the political risks of, the single sourcing versus multi-sourcing, that aspect of things, just the regular operational risk. But I guess that without trying to boil the ocean there, I think I really agree with something that Luis brought up. So it's really around the prioritization. So what is important for your company? Because that ultimately depends on, the industry and the regulatory environment, the geographies you operate in, but also your business strategy, right? So, risks for a company that's a cost leader might look different than someone who's priding themselves on getting the goods fast to the consumers, for example. So I think that was a really good point that Luis made. Just wanted to kind of highlight that. I fully agree with that point.
I love the full alignment as a group here. So I would like to read one of the comments from Bill McIntyre. Sorry for my pronunciation. I'm glad Luis mentioned cybersecurity. Any feedback from the panel, for example, Ray, as we see a huge APS vendor recently been impacted by a ransomware attack and how their customers are being affected. Any advice for BY customers? Ray, can you take this question, please?
I'll have an attempt at answering that. Hi, Bill. Great question. We are aware, as I said, increasingly aware of issues like cyber attack being more and more prevalent. And to counter that, one of the things that we do is we do an upfront inherent risk assessment on any kind of relationship with our third parties, which kind of like opens up the potentials for vulnerabilities, so we understand what the endpoint vulnerabilities may look like and where the ransomware may be deployed. But you can't, and also having that inherent assessment doesn't necessarily make the whole life cycle of the relationship completely, foolproof. So the ransomware could happen at any point. So as a proactive mitigant, we have contractual agreements with our third parties that if there are any ransomware attack on us via their back doors, there should be cyber insurance, indemnity. We ask them to provide us with clear industry standard assurance. We call it a SIG-Lite, but it's the ISO certification, which provides us with very clear view of how the we call it an STP, but it's a secure transmission between an entity and entity is established. So it's almost like building a lighter vision of the relationship with the third party. You ask multiple layers of questions and you superimpose those answers and then figure out where the vulnerable points are. And then it's up to your executive to whether they want to accept that risk or they want to apply some kind of residual risk sort of like remediation. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Ray. I don't know actually, should I reword the question or the answer? I don't know, but let's wait. Luis, I would like to go into the second topic. What perfect supply chain visibility looks like, if there is such thing as perfect supply chain visibility. But as supply chain procurement, supply chain professionals, we know how important is not only digitalization and the tools, adoption of all these fancy tools, machine learnings, AI, Internet of Things, but also practices, leadership behaviors. So what's your view, Luis, in terms of a perfect supply chain visibility?
I mean, related to that, then I would be maybe probably this relationship management with key supply chain partners. Like if you're talking about, main vendors or main, if you're working with a product, specifically transportation, that way I think that communication is, that it goes both ways, and that you could have, you could have technology, you could have some tools to work on supply chain resiliency, but at the end, I think that it doesn't. You still have to keep the human component and this leadership component that you're talking about, and having this open communication with all of the partners you have, so you can react quickly and have that level of visibility and transparency on both ways, so you can make sure that you're having the least possible risks and that you're able to continue working with business continuity.
Mm-hmm. And Ronan, would you say that are there any blockers to this perfect idealistic supply chain visible?
Yeah, I would say I think that we could raise a couple here to start from. I think the first one, when you talk about visibility and in the supply chain, if we establish that visibility is having data available for you to make decisions promptly, the first thing that will come always to mind to every single executive is, how much does it cost me, right? The cost for visibility is extremely high because you have to have master data maintained, you have to have data all across the supply chain maintained, and that is costful. We can't neglect it. There is another thing in my eyes is a cultural aspect. So you always have some resistance, especially from suppliers, to share with you their data because they don't know how much the data they will share will become leverage for the customer to bargain price, right? So that is always something you will face. So those two, I would say probably those two are the most critical ones in my eyes. So the first is the cultural resistance you find in the supply chain. And the other one obviously is the cost of creating full visible supply chain.
I love the cultural aspect because actually it's something I'm building in the change management currently with the contract I have with an organization, and culturally suppliers are very reluctant to share their data. So we are doing a piece of change management, reassuring them that it's for the greater good, explaining the benefits they will have for their customers. So Ville, is there such thing as perfect supply chain visibility, blockers, benefits? What do you think?
Yeah, I guess it is a quite utopistic idea there. I think that there is probably a perfect supply chain visibility for a specific person. So I think each one of us kind of defines it slightly differently, what supply chain visibility means for them. For someone looking after the supplier risk management, maybe it is the having the multi-tier visibility and understanding the ESG credentials of the suppliers. For someone else, it might be shipment visibility. I fully agree with Ronan there. I think the cost is a very important thing. So how do we make it practical? And also, how do we ensure the availability of data? This is something that we deal with quite a lot, is you usually have visibility into the processes where you have digitized and you have data available. But what about the parts of the business that are not digital? So there's still a lot of companies doing things outside of the, let's say, governed systems or the structured data exchange. So there are those gaps in availability of the data. And I would also raise up the accessibility of data. So is the data, even if you have the data available, is it available to all the people who need it for decision making? So let's say that the logistics team has perfect visibility into what's going on, but does sourcing team have access to that, for just as an example? So I think that is something that we increasingly come across, is that the companies in general have pretty good visibility where they've prioritized it. So there are solutions, but then is that data actually effectively shared within the organization? That seems to be a pretty big blocker at the moment.
Yes, and I would like also to read a question, and Luis, if you can pick this up. Schneider is, so Richard, thank you for asking this question. Schneider is considered by Gartner as one of the top supply chain globally. How deep do you need to go into your sub-tier supplier community to be comfortable that you have complete visibility?
Hi, and sure, to Richard. Regarding this, I will go a bit to relate this to the previous answer by Ron and Bill. At the end, you have to understand which are your key paths in terms of risk, right? Like definitely, that the digital part is an important risk. You have to make sure you cover that. And I mean, you have an assessment for that. You have some, dual pre-work on that. And then regarding you could say that the operations, supply chain, manufacturing part, you work with, your key suppliers. We have our core suppliers in which we work with a lot of initiatives that allows us to track, on a deeper level, this part. Then if you go probably to the indirect part of procurement, you will have to establish how deep do you want to go, because at the end, related to what Ronan was saying, there is a cost involved in there.
Thank you, Luis. And I think if we add the main objective of any company, I think if you as a company, you have the consumer at the heart of what you do, you will go as deep as your consumer will say, because if the consumer will dictate how responsibly sourced a product is, so then you really need to go to the third party traceability. So this is really, I think it depends very much on the industry, on the strategic, goals of a company. Anything to add, Ray? In response to Richard's question.
Thank you, Anna, as always. There is, I agree with all of what's just been said. It is subject dependent, relationship dependent, and industry dependent. To give you a one-dimensional view from my perspective, from a financial industry, being in the UK, we have regulatory drive behind understanding fourth-party engagement. What we also extend out to the nth party engagement, meaning that if you have a relationship with a third party, you need to establish how deep that relationship goes. That could have a material impact on your service. So because we don't exist in a sort of like a closed loop relationship with a supplier or a third party, we ask them before the engagement commences, so before contract, that for that supplier to provide that service to us, are they going to sub-outsource that service to further third parties and fourth parties? So we kind of build a vision of who will be involved in delivering that service, and we apply the criticality of those suppliers and sub-suppliers and build that view. Sometimes it just stops at a third party plus AWS, because everybody's putting everything into AWS. So AWS becomes the fourth party and we have to assess that risk. Sometimes it goes into 3, 4, 5 different layers. So it is very much materiality driven, subject dependent, and your regulatory environment.
Anything to add, Ronan?
Okay, I think well, it's difficult to add anything because I think everyone is contributing very well. I think the only thing I would add is look into a manufacturing environments. I would say that the necessity of going deeper in the visibility in the supply chain is somehow connected to the fast-paced environment that you are in. So let's say the lower the takt time, the lowest the takt time is, the more products you have to deliver, the faster you have to deliver, the more visibility you need to have. And then if you work with batches, let's say you get batch deliveries that are worth for a month, and then obviously you have much more time to react and you don't need to go so further deep down. So that's the only thing I would add. So if you look to very fast-paced environments such as automotive business, where you talk about 30 seconds stack time, eventually you need to have the visibility that go up to the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 eventually. But if you go to other businesses that are more, let's say, slow moving, you don't need to have that visibility in systems. You can manage the visibility through relationship. So that's the nuance, I would say, in depending on the business that you're related to.
Thank you, Ronan. And Vila, I would like you to now to share your views in relation to our third topic, because time flies quickly when we have so many, experts at the table. Bridging the gap to perfect visibility, quick wins, and priority setting. What's your view?
Yeah, I think that's again, yet another very broad topic, and I was still thinking about the last one, so there was such great answers. So thank you guys for sharing your thoughts there. So just yeah, amazing insights there. Again, I think it's very much if we think about like bridging the gaps in visibility in organizations. Again, there's different priorities for different organizations, and that will impact what's going to be the thing that you want to focus on. In general, I would say that audit your capabilities and challenge the status quo, because this is something that we see and hear a lot amongst our customers, is that decisions sometime in the past have been made for why things are the way they are, and maybe the parameters have changed in between. So maybe we have accepted something in the past because it was impractical or too expensive to fix something, and now with technology you can actually, or more modern technology, you can actually address that problem, but no one has thought of that because it has been sort of accepted as the truth that this is just the way things are. And these are rarely the bigger things. I think bigger kind of more strategic topics tend to get covered, but something that we see with our clients, there's a huge value loss if we look at, for example, CPG companies with chargebacks on your processes towards vendors. A lot of that has to do with data quality. So you're paying a lot of money to retailers based on contractual arrangements around data exchange, and these are things that may go even unnoticed. And it's, you can talk about millions in some cases in charges per year. And it's just something that no one has thought of challenging or really done the audit around. And I think that's something that you can take away. So if I summarize into that, I think it's take stock with what you have, what are the important things in your business, and challenge the status quo and really look into things, because you might discover a lot of value loss in your business that you didn't even know was there. So that might be
that. Yeah. And that's a leadership capability that we need to encourage as supply chain leaders. We need to, trust is good, control is better. Never in supply chain, never trust, have partnerships, but all the time audit and do the follow-ups and continuous improvement. Ray, from your experience, what's your take on bridging the gap to perfect visibility?
So this is a great question, and some great points have already been made. So I'm just going to go over some of them, probably repeating those points. But it does depend on the industry that you are in. Whether things get stuck in the Suez Canal doesn't interest me, because I don't have that kind of setup. But the fact that some of the suppliers that I use, my organization use, they are serviced out of countries that are called offline countries. So we are somewhat blind to their financial risk modeling, their financial ratios, geopolitical risk that happens on the ground. So the realness of that is real risk to my organization, because if that service turns off because there's a sanction against that country and we have to withdraw that service, that means having to think about changing that service to a different geolocation, finding that alternative supplier. So visibility, being able to enhance technological connection, invest in technology to make sure we have a sort of like a deeper view of real-time risk metrics, that's going to get to me as close as perfection as possible.
This is a masterclass, so I hope the audience is taking, they are taking notes. Luis, anything to add from your procurement shoes in terms of bridging the gap to perfect visibility? Anything to add in terms of social value, for example? How do you manage your supply base, making sure that you have that perfect visibility to social value or to, the social element of ESG?
I think that would be part of the initial assessments within the supply base, especially the mostly ongoing. If you have preferred suppliers, that's something to consider on. Like where do you have least risk? Where are you being socially responsible? Where what's bringing you closer to the people, to society? I think that's something that we will consider on the initial assessments as part of any selection when you're evaluating, supplier selection.
Yeah, really good point, Luis. I remember my days in procurement. Ronan, in the aluminum industry, how do you bridge the gap to perfect visibility, let's say, in terms of environmental friendly, reduce carbon footprint?
Sure. Yeah. I'm not on mute. Yeah, just checking. So for instance, just connecting again to what I was saying before, CBAM is something that's just coming very strong in 2027 in the UK and EU as well. So CBAM is actually measuring the footprint of the supply chain from the smelter producer until the final product. So one way that we decided internally here in procurement, instead of working with contracts that were established by the suppliers in the past, this year we have created one process called RFP, or request for proposal. Those that are familiar with, and then we send to suppliers with crystal clear requirements as to the carbon footprint and the data they could share. In the past, in this current year, we didn't receive anything. We just received the standards. So next year they are obliged to provide the information, and then we have a system in place that's called EcoVadis, and then the suppliers are sort of responsible for inputting the data into EcoVadis. So we have like a database for our metal, and then we can pass on to the next customer. So that's the way we're bridging when you look to ESG or carbon footprint. So we have like a system to control and hold all the information as to carbon footprint comes from supply, and then we just pass on to the next customer, and they have to do the same thing to the final customer. So bridging the gap, so answering the question in a very simplistic way, is understand where the focus is, right? In our case, it was the metal supply, and then you test the supply chain, you leverage the existing technology because EcoVadis is something that we already had. You streamline the data sharing, and then you try.
Perfect. And EcoVadis, SEDEX, so they are similar tools to create that and to bridge the gap to perfect the visibility. Ville, very quickly, please, any thoughts to this point? Anything to add?
I'm not sure there's a lot to add to that. I think we've covered it pretty well. I think on the information exchange with suppliers it's kind of something that we touched upon before as well, that there's a lot of obviously putting it into contracts that suppliers are required to deliver certain information. Well, the contract doesn't really mean anything unless you can enforce that. So I think that's just something good to keep in mind, that even though you have it on paper, you also have to have the enforcement mechanism, make sure that it's actually working in practice. So that's just one thought that has come up in some conversations. So I thought that would be a relevant thing to bring up as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Ville. I would like now, as a round table, to address one closing thought. But before we do that, I would like to award now, let's see. I would like to award suspense now, to award Bill for addressing the cybersecurity question and the APS vendor question. So a supply chain talk mug for you, which will be couriered by my colleagues at the Business Reporter. Congratulations. So now, as a round table, I would like to have a closing thought and an action for the leadership audience, for those who are watching us and listening to us. Ray, what's your closing thought? One action point that you would like the audience to take away?
I think if there's one single overriding point to be made from all of this, is to have the executive sponsorship to support the TPRM program, the supply chain risk management program, because it's not down to the outsourcing team or the risk team. It's a combination of the business owners, the risk management function, the sourcing team, and the external relationship management. So executive sponsorship into managing third-party risk is critical in success.
Love it, Ray. Thank you. Luis, your closing thought and action item.
I would say establish priorities, like what do you want to assess in terms of risk, and probably would be like something related to what Ray was saying, making sure that you have the internal alignment before you go and give the next step.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Sponsorship priorities. Ronan, your closing thought, please.
For me, I would say when you think about visibility, everyone thinks about fancy systems that would draft lots of dashboards that would be amazing for you to go in an executive meeting and present them. I would say probably just leverage the technology you have already in place. We tend to look to let's say the neighbor's garden and think that their grass is greener, and eventually we have lots of good things inside of our own company that we're not actually leveraging properly.
Amazing. So leveraging the internal tools. And Ville, your closing thought and action item, please.
Yeah, I guess summarizing kind of what was understand priorities, leverage, or kind of understand what the situation is, kind of do that audit, and then think about availability of data, accessibility of data, and then quality of data. I think those would be the key things that's specific to your situation and your business. I think that's what I would summarize as.
You make my life easier. Ville, you summarized it really well as a moderator. So from my side, I think it's leadership. No supply chain visibility, no tools in this world would ever provide visibility, risk mitigation without the right leadership. Inclusive, diverse opinions, and I think risk is becoming part of who we are as supply chain, because this is the reality of our times. So I think those companies who embrace risk management and as part of their day-to-day business, they will succeed in the future. So leadership, inclusive, and make risk management part of your day-to-day. Thank you so much. It's a masterclass, the way I like to call it. And I would like to see you again on my show. And I would like also to invite the audience to dial in at the same time on Wednesday, 4 p.m. UK time. The next episode is From Afterthought to Essential, Optimizing Electronics Sourcing in Your Procurement Strategy. Thank you so much and see you next time. Bye-bye.